Things hidden. And so I'm your host of this podcast, David Gornoski, and I'm going to do a special kind of edition where we're going to switch gears. Usually on Things Hidden, a podcast, we go through a deep dive of anthropology in a broader scope of history. We're going to do that today, but we're going to kind of do it within the frame of analyzing the new Joker film. So this is a spoiler alert program. Spoiler, don't get scared if there's if you hear something. So there's a spoiler in this analysis. But obviously Joker has touched a nerve with a lot of people. Some people hate it, some people love it. It's this big, exciting thing. And that tends to happen when you have a piece of art that is smuggled into pop culture, right? Because pop culture gets to hear the full, deeper, edgier stuff of someone trying to make an art film rather than just a action flick with cars and explosions. And this movie Joker has touched a nerve because it's a reflection of the culture of our time. We're in a strange place in our culture, the way we feel about it, and a lot of crazy things changing fast, and a lot of confusion about what's up and down and how our institutions are going to pan out and whether they're trustworthy and so on. So that word culture is important here. And remember, with my work, I often will integrate Rene Girard's mimetic theory as a helpful toolkit to give us some analysis of what is happening here in culture. So the word culture, let's start there. Culture comes from this word of cultivation, of agriculture, to get the ground ready, till it, so that you can make it fruitful. So culture is tied agriculturally. Agriculture and culture are tied together. And then, of course, we have the word religion, which the Latin word for the Latin root for religion means to bind together, what binds us together. So religion and culture are tied together intrinsically. They're almost synonyms, but a little bit different. And then agriculture, this is the cycles of ancient society, and even today, it's still a vestige word that we use to describe what we do today. But what Joker is doing is it's giving us a really penetrating reflection of the culture of our time, and I would like to argue that it's something that only can be understood within a context of understanding how Christianity gives us the perspective to understand human relationships, to understand it without being totally blinded by the matrix of human relationships itself. It gives us a God's vantage point of human drama and relationships and conflict and desire and what moves culture, what creates culture, what makes us do what we do on a big scale and then a small scale in our families and neighborhoods. And so it's the impact of the Christian story in the West that has given us this unique kind of film like Joker that's unique to the West. And I will call it a deconstruction of a foundation myth. That's what I'm calling the Joker movie. And what I mean by that is, in foundation myths, in ancient mythology, it usually deals with, it starts in chaos, a primordial chaos that's represented through nature, but is often a clue to actual human relationships in chaos. And then there's order. So it goes from chaos to order. And in the Joker movie, you have order breaking apart at the seams that leads to chaos at the end. So it's a reversal of a foundation myth that you would find in mythology. And the only way we have the ability to even have a modern piece of myth like Joker in cinema that can so effectively critique a foundational myth like it does is because of the infection of Christian subversion of mythology and the collective violence that it reinforces and the violent hierarchy that it reinforces. So with the Joker movie, you get this city in decay. It's an apocalyptic film. So it starts off, with things are falling apart. There's obviously, the influence by the Taxi movie the Taxi Driver movie from Scorsese from the 70s. That's a big influence on this film. But it starts off in an apocalyptic, things are falling apart. You see trash piling up, and you see this motif of trash in Joker. Joker is at parity with the city's trash. He's the vessel for the city's trash in the sense that He's a reflection of the lowest people on the hierarchy of that stratosphere, that stratification of society. And so in the movie, he has the signs and everything must go, which is an apocalyptic language that there's judgment coming. Something's going to change the whole framework of this whole town. Something needs to change. Everything must go. There's a reckoning coming. There's judgment. There's kind of like a divine wrath coming, right? And again, it's playing with mythology, but it's critiquing it, it's deconstructing it, but it's still within the frame of mythology, as I'll point out. And so then you have this Thomas Wayne character, which is Bruce, Batman's father, and he represents kind of the old hierarchical structure as it is in the modern time today, meaning the winners are the winners and the losers are the losers. And if he basically says in an interview, if you didn't make it in life, I can't help that you're a loser. Basically, that's a reflection on your character, which is like a classic encapsulation of the way the ancient world kind of viewed someone who was of poverty or famine or isolation, sickness, disability, anything that would make them a target for being, a victim or an oppressed person. That was a sign that the gods were disfavoring you. That was a sign that you deserved what you got. And it was a sign that, there was no reason to say why we should care about you. You're a loser in society, and that's just the way it goes. That's the hierarchy. That's the way the world works. And that hierarchy in the ancient world was not to be messed with, meaning you were not supposed to say, someone on a lowest end of the trash area of society, the losers, which is the vast majority of the people in the ancient world, having no means of power, they're slaves, and on that level, they're not given any concern about their emotional state of being. But in Joker, because of the influence of Christianity, remember Jesus saying the first shall be last and the last shall be first, the lowest level of society on this hierarchy, we are concerned with his emotional state. We're concerned with his inner psychological life. So there's empathy in the structure of the movie because of, again, the Christian sandbox that we're playing in 2,000 years since, Christianity came onto the scene and has infected the West, particularly because of its long-standing influence on our art and ethics and so on. And so Joker is a scapegoat. And I want you to understand that, to hear from the scapegoat's vantage point is something given to us from the influence of the stories of Jesus in his life and even the Old Testament prophets before him, kind of prefiguring what Jesus fulfills in the life of a scapegoat, the life of a misfit that's upending the hierarchy of his time that is mediated by violence. But the problem with the Joker story, of course, is that it's still encapsulated in the logic of violence because it's based on vengeance, whereas Jesus is based on healing the relationships between those who have and those who are at the top and those who are victims of society. So Joker reminds me of the demoniac in the gospel stories in the town of the Gerasenes that Jesus goes to in the northern part of Galilee. It's the only properly pagan Roman outlet town that he goes to in his ministry, and it's supposed to be a model town as part of the Decapolis of how the Romans wanted the people of Judea to understand the Roman way of life. It's like Epcot, it's supposed to be a modern, a model representation of the way of the world as Rome understood it, the empire. They wanted to plant that in the middle of Judea to kind of show them this is what the good life is all about. And when Jesus goes to that town, he meets someone that's just like Joker in our modern times. Someone who is possessed with self-hate. He's self-stoning himself. And notice that Joker is hitting the wall with his head and he's kicking trash so painfully so. He's almost he sees trash as his double. It's like a reflection of himself, and you see him in one scene kicking the trash violently and hurt in a way that's got to be painful. So you see him having self-hatred manifest in physical demonstrations, just like in this demoniac character in this story that Jesus meets. He's out in the middle of the outcast outskirts of society, and he's self-stoning himself. He doesn't even have to worry about, in the ancient world, if you were a person of disability or mental disorder or poverty or disfigurement or a minority race within another ethnic group, you were a target for potential stoning for even the slightest provocations or violations of your place in society. violations of a taboo, or even a false accusation that you violated a taboo. But with Joker, he's in that lower stratosphere, but you can tell that things are not the same in modern times and this apocalyptic Joker story. Because with Jesus, the town is not concerned with the demoniac's care. They have him over in the place of death, the place of tombs, the place of awfulness and uncleanliness, and that's where they want him, because he's a measuring rod for everybody else's relative religion. They're binding together. They are bound together by the fact that they're not him, that they're not messed up, they're not self-hating, they're not. So he's kind of like a trash receptacle for all of the community's problems. Just like Joker is hanging out in the trash and getting beaten up in the trash and having a poor job and living in a destitute neighborhood, in a destitute community, in a destitute physical condition, and he's self-hating himself and he's hurting himself. And so, in this Joker movie, what's interesting is that, Joker is kind of, there's this theme of what are you allowed to laugh about, right? And that's always a tell about what's sacred in society. And Joker's questioning, what's funny. Who are you to define what's funny? Like, I have my view of the world that's funny, and and then there's this broader world represented by the Murray, the talk show host on the late night television that his mother likes to watch and he likes to watch. And this late night talk show host, kind of by Robert De Niro, kind of represents the establishment gatekeeper of the dominant narrative of his world. And he's defining what's funny and what's not funny. And in some sense, that's another way of saying what's clean and what's unclean. Because if you can laugh at something, that means it's, you can make fun of it, that means it's not sacred. If you can't laugh at something, that means it's in the domain of the sacred. It's untouchable. It's the place of the gods. It's the place of the transcendent that you don't mess with. And so you have this motif there, just like with the demoniac. He's unclean. He's out in the place of death. He's out in the place of he's the conduit for all. He's a representation of all the worst and the trash that's projected onto him by his community. And of course, Jesus calls us, what's your name? And he says, my name is Legion. That's the name of a Roman, garrison. It's a Roman military unit. And the symbol of that was a pig. Everywhere you would go around the world where the Roman Empire would show up, when you saw their standard, their emblem put on signs or posts or their shields, it was a war pig. And it's interesting because, of course, Jesus casts the legion demoniac spirit, the psychological trauma, the terror that's plaguing his mind, into a herd of pigs. So it's the first story in history we know of in which a crowd is exorcised out of a person rather than a person excommunicated out of a crowd. So in a society, typically, you find a monster like Joker and you cast him into the trash. That's that you're exorcising him out of society. You're expelling him. You're scapegoating him. You're sacrificing them out of society. But in what Jesus does is he casts the crowd, the town, out of the misfit. So he redeems the misfit. He heals the relationship, and he lets him be freed of that mental prison of self-hate and internalizing other people's accusations and domination of you and allowing you to become a victim and living and becoming that victim to the point where you don't have to let them stone you. You just stone yourself out of self-hate. So Joker's dealing with that same problem. And it's because of the influence of Christianity in that story, like the Gerasene's demoniac, that we live in a day where that's a major motion picture story, where we're concerned about the psychological inner life of a person who in Jesus's day would just be left to be, an outcast, a demoniac, and we're not concerned with his emotional life. We don't want to know anything about him. He is a bad person and he deserves his lot. He deserves his low place in trash and uncleanliness. But in our time, we want to know what's up with that person. We have a sympathy for that person. We want to see that person get justice. And that's because of the influence of Christian storytelling. That doesn't mean, of course, the church's doctrines have lived up to that because humans are humans and it's slow. We are slow as a species to let go and accept what's obvious in the story of the Gospels about our need to desire mercy, not sacrifice. It's a slow process that this story has had in shaping the West and the West way of storytelling, and what haunts the West culturally. There's that word again, culture. So, something interesting I noticed just, and again, this is not like a key component of my analysis of this, but, his name Joker is Arthur Fleck. And, Arthur has a royal connotation in our culture. And it has, roots in kind of, of a kingly, or some words say it means courage, hero kind of feeling. And Fleck is like a small bit of light. So it's like the king of light, the king of a little fleck of light. You could see his name as that. And it's interesting because he also says that when he's asked about his act, what is your act called? He calls it carnival. Now, carnival is an interesting word because carnival is something that would be a practice in the ancient world prior to the introduction of the Jesus story that destroys mythology and destroys the hierarchy of the ancient world over time, not in an immediate way. But carnival was a foundational practice for cultures all over the world. You would have a carnival that would be where you have a hierarchy where the slaves have their place, and the people above them have their place, and the people at the top have their place, and you do not violate their place. You don't say, I wish I could be the king. No, if you're a person at the lowest level, you just accept your lot. There's no American dream kind of thing where you can move up the ladder of success in the ancient world. But when you had a carnival, it was a safe time where you could play in a safe, controlled environment related to the changing of seasons, which reflect the cycle of life and the cycle of that people's heritage and shared history and shared story, where you could play act kind of the original chaos that led to your particular community and history stumbling on a way of channeling chaotic envy and chaotic accusations and greed and, chaotic desire for each other's stuff and station in life. That chaos that we see, again, at the foundational myths in most cultures, we have foundational myths where it starts in chaos, which shows signs that it's related to human relational chaos, out of control passion and desire reciprocating itself over and over again in a feedback loop of aggression and bad blood. And then that chaos leads to order. But with this Joker story, it's kind of interesting because the idea of carnival being what is the act of Joker is this notion that now we're going to see the ancient ritual carnival demonstrated to us in this movie. But it's different. Because in the ancient carnivals around, let's take winter solstice. There's all kinds of cultures, Japanese cultures, German cultures. You can go, but let's take the Roman culture and their practice of Saturnalia, which was a carnival, a festival around the time of the winter solstice, and it was in honor of the god of Saturn. Now, notice the word Saturn. That god was a Titan who was a symbol of agriculture, a symbol of financial success. And that was what you celebrated and worshipped at the moment of winter solstice, which is the lowest amount of daylight in the year. So it's like you're blessing, you're having a celebration to say, okay, we've done what we were supposed to do to keep our society together. Now we're about to go through the dark period of winter where things get tighter and there's more opportunity for famine or sickness or death and things like that might make us all stressed out and want to tear each other apart and go back to that primordial chaos that our founding myth, warns us about. So we're going to have a safe time to let loose, break down the boundaries of hierarchy and differentiation and have a carnival. So the slaves would get, for that moment of the carnival, they'd get to serve the masters. And the masters would, the masters would serve the slaves. And they would wear masks. So everybody's stationed at the dancing and orgies and so forth were, everybody's identity was masked. So you didn't know who was the top and who was the lower person. Everybody could just kind of be an amorphous blob of passion and, revelry and fighting and singing and orgies and all kinds of crazy wildness, letting it loose. And then it would then culminate in a sacrifice with a person. In the oldest times, they would do animals too, but I think in the earliest times, they would pick a person who they would parade as a mock king and then sacrifice that young man to the god of Saturn, the god of fortune. So again, take that movie Joker. He says, "My act is carnival," and you have this kind of revenge pattern opening up in Gotham about the hierarchy of his time, and Thomas Wayne is kind of a representative of the god of he's the gods of that community, the powerful, untouchable billionaire class who run the city and want to clean it up, but they're symbols of wealth, right? They're symbols of of wealth, like Saturn was in his time, and many other gods in this period. So you can see that kind of layer there of, Arthur Fleck, King of the Light, Saturnalia, the festival of the little fleck of light that you have on that darkest day of the year where the least amount of sunlight happens. And so that's celebrated with this sacrifice of a mock king, sacrifice young man, usually someone from a lower status probably, who is sacrificed to propitiate the god and the order of prosperity and so forth at this darkest time. That fleck of light is offered, right? So Arthur, this little mock king, is positioned to be a sacrifice, and of course he is in some sense almost, he's living a life of being grinded down as a trash, as a sacrifice, and then he starts to fight back. He starts to want vengeance, and it's interesting too because in a lot of foundational stories of great civilizations, it's a founding story of twins, of brothers, enemy brothers. So Cain and Abel, Cain kills Abel, and then he founds the first city, the Bible says. And that's actually deconstructing this mechanism. That's why we're able to pick up on this pattern more easier, is because of the Bible's influence on our ability to discern these texts. But then we look at more mythologically concealed masked texts that hide the violence and try to justify it. And you take a founding like Rome, where Romulus and Remus is brothers, and Romulus kills Remus, and on his blood he founds the first city of Rome. It's the beginning of their empire. That's their founding mythology. So if you think about Joker as like a critique of founding myths of the old order, because of the influence of Christianity in our own time today, you can see there that if Batman is the original kind of hero, let's say Batman is Romulus, that's the mainstream hero that we've all grown up with, that Romulus killed Remus and then he founded the order that is Rome today. But this is like a reply to that. This is like if Remus told his story. This is what Joker is to Batman. And there's, again, a spoiler there, that there's this insinuation that it's murky and it's left up for, you can go either way with it in the plot line, but there's this insinuation that perhaps even Joker is the half brother of this Bruce Wayne who's going to be Batman at some point. So there you have the enemy brothers, right? And so as we watch Joker, and we've had Batman be our Romulus, so to speak, for our culture and our understanding, Batman's kind of like a little hero god figure in folk, popular culture. A vestige of that same thing that all humans wanted and have constructed about what the good life is and what a true hero and a leader should be and what we should role model and imitate. But now it's like the person who is the half-brother, the illegitimate child, now he gets to have his story told, and now you get to hear Remus's perspective, and you get to see, well, look, he's not the villain that the Roman myth of Romulus made him out to be. He actually has his own issues, and that you sympathize with him. Again, this is something you only get with 2,000 years of Christianity deconstructing the mythic framework that our societies came out of, what humanity was birthed out of, this religious structure, the binding together of a community based on an agreed upon sacrificial pecking order in which the lowest people have no place to move up. And Thomas Wayne represents, again, he's a figure for that old sacrificial order that our own culture is wrestling with right now, in the headlines and world affairs every day, because he says, if you're a loser, you've deserved your status in life because, you didn't work hard. I can't help it for you. There's something wrong with you. So he wants to clean up the losers. It's kind of a sacrificial language there. Clean up the demoniacs, right? Clean them all up. Get them out of the society. And, but yet Arthur has this ability to have envy. So we see that he's envious. And again, in the ancient societies, they were worried about allowing envy to be open. You closed it up. You didn't have the right to be desirous of the king of the town's place. If you were a peasant or someone in Arthur or Joker's place, you didn't get to just say, oh, I can be like that. I mean, you might felt that one day, but you were not allowed to express that. No one cared about your opinion in that way, that, you think it's unfair that he's rich and you're not, and you live in squalor. And so, there's this boundary there that you see in the movie where, there's what we call in mimetic theory, external mediation and internal mediation. And external mediation is a role model that is far away from you, so you can't really get close enough to get, in a state of rivalry with them. So when Arthur is watching the late night host, he's doing comedy, he's doing jokes, and Arthur has a daydream that man is his father. He's on the show with him. He's longing for that undifferentiation when they can be closer in proximity. And that's what, that closer in proximity is what Girard would call internal mediation, where now, if he could just be on stage with him, then he'll be in proximity to be him. He'll be closer to attaining the status of success and power that he perceives him having. So at first he's content, to just respect him and love what he is from afar, right? And Girard says external role models, we don't get into conflict as much. If you like, King Arthur novels, and you don't have to worry about rivaling him because you're just reading this icon above you. Or if you like Batman, you're not going to be in rivalry with Batman, but you might be in rival with the person at work, or you might be in rival with your political rival at the gym or something you're arguing with. And that's where conflict and rivalry can breed and be contagiously spreading into a state of chaos. So it's not until this icon of the established narrative, this late night host, it's not until he finds the video clip of Arthur doing his stand-up routine, which is very bizarre and very anti-humor. Kind of reminds me of the comedy of anti-humor that you saw with what's his name, Andy Kaufman, in the 70s, which is at the same time, where Andy Kaufman had that anti-humor that you kind of see with Joaquin Phoenix's Arthur Fleck there, that character. He kind of bombs, it's kind of awkward, it's weird, it's anti-humor, it's violating the sacred boundaries of what, this is humor, this is not humor, and he's throwing it up. He's kind of like a trickster archetype. He's kind of like a prophet, which stand-up comedians are supposed to play that role anyways. It's kind of like the people that can say things and do things that the rest of society can't. And so his weird performance catches the eye of this late-night icon that he kind of desires for it to be on his show, and he has a dream or an imagination that he's on his show, and that the man is basically like a warm, loving father figure to him. And of course, Arthur doesn't have a father figure in his life, and his mother's in bad shape. And then the guy points out his awful humor, his humor, and laughs at it and mocks it, and kind of puts him back in his place as the demoniac of his town, of the reject, of the loser, as the trash receptacle. But the fact that he put him into his space of being up there creates that internal mediation effect. Like, oh, now I'm on your playing field. Now there's possibility for rivalry. Now I could actually grasp you. I could actually reach you and be you and actually devour you. And now there's this a little bit of a brewing of aggression that Arthur can have. And that's what mimetic desire is. From afar, there's no conflict, but the closer you get to someone, that's where conflict is more likely to be developed. That's why, again, enemy brothers, right? Romulus and Remus, they're like twins, and then that's where conflict and chaos is sown because of how close and how alike they are. And it's Romulus kills Remus and he founds Rome, and the order is restored. But in this story, of course, it's a reversal of that. It's not a founding myth. It's a ending myth. It's the end of an empire. It's the destruction of the grandeur of a hierarchical structure like Gotham. Because when you get to that final, showdown where Joker gets invited to come on this man's the late night talk show host's program, there's almost like a trial scene but it's not where they force him like a scapegoat in the ancient world. They had to force the confession out of the victim sometimes to legitimize, or in the witch trials, they would force the witches to say, yes, I caused this disease, or I caused the child to die because I'm a witch, or whoever it was. But in this case, because again of Christian influence, the victim embraces the fact that, I killed these people in the subway. I killed the rich elites. I was the clown killer. And again, he's building, there's a movement of undifferentiated masked people, just like in an ancient carnival practice where everybody puts on a mask and there is no differentiation. It's all just an amorphous mob of passion and envy unleashed and desire. That movement's building when they hear the news report of him killing, of a clown guy killing these rich, bad guys in the subway. But in that final climactic moment where he meets his kind of father figure, or he desires to be this father figure, this late night talk show host, he openly admits, I killed those people. That was me. And then the late night host kind of acts as the accuser for the establishment crowd and says, well, why would you do that? And what's wrong with you? And kind of giving him the reinforcement of the myth of the world. And just like a prophetic voice in the Old Testament and New Testament with Jesus, he fights back. He speaks back. He says, no, I don't play by this rule. I'm not going to accept my place as guilty. I mean, in the sense that I don't deserve to be the villain. Who are you to define what are the boundaries or not, And then he kills the late night talk show host, who is the gatekeeper for what's humorous and what's the establishment story. He shoots him. So it's like a reverse sacrifice, instead of them all, the late night show host and his crowd and the police and everybody just accosting and, arresting or, putting him in prison for life or killing or whatever, a shootout or something with the cops. It's not that classic mechanism like you would see in the ancient world. No, he shoots the representative of the established order and kills him. He sacrifices. He gets revenge. It's vengeance, reversal sacrifice. And then there's the scene after that where the town goes into chaos. The clown gang movement that's kind of like reminiscent of the resistance. They even have resistance signs and stuff in the crowd, and fascist Thomas Wayne. So it's an allusion to what we're in now. They kind of raids, fires, all this stuff. And he has, this moment where he's been in the cop car and then an ambulance, a guy, one of the protesters commandeers a ambulance and runs it into the cops and kills the cops and brings Joker's body out. And he's kind of laying on the hood of the cop car, which is a symbol of law and order and hierarchy and structure. And he comes up kind of like in a resurrection, kind of look where he rises up and accepts his role as the king of chaos. So it's the reversal of ancient myth that starts with chaos and then sacrifice happens and order is established. It's the reversal of that. There's order, but it's falling apart. Everything must go at the beginning is the sign he's holding. And, the trash is piling up. He fights it. And then, of course, there's another scene where he kills one of the bullies at his job who's a bigger man and all this stuff. And he saves the life of a dwarf who's one of his coworkers because the dwarf never made fun of him. He was bullied by the people who had made fun of him because of his stature. So Joker, as representation, is of the scapegoat. There's meaninglessness in everything he does. He doesn't have truly an agenda, but he does have an affinity for the scapegoat and the underdog. So there's a scene where he kills this big, tall, bully guy, but he saves the life of the other dwarf coworker because, he said, you never made fun of me. So again, he sees him lower on the hierarchy than him because of his stature and everything of being bullied. And so he protects him and saves him. You can go. I'm not going to kill you even though I killed this big guy that's taller than me and picking on me at the beginning of the movie. So there you go. That's what you see with Joker. You see a reversal of the founding myth of ancient society. And the only way we have that is because of Christianity opening up the guts, the sausage making of mythology and collective violence, and allowing us to see it for what it really is. Now, of course, it doesn't provide healing, because Jesus heals the demoniac in his story. He restores that relationship, and it says, of course, the town was terrified when they found out that man was of his right mind. Joker doesn't have healing. He's still in his pain. He doesn't have any father figure. It doesn't resolve that tension, and he even has to kill his mother. So in this story, matriarchy and patriarchy are both condemned as problematic, as, both of them can be seen as scapegoats. Both of them can be seen as untrustworthy in this story. This is a victim that's getting revenge, and there's really no meaning to it because no order is established. It's just chaos is the end of the show. And that's where we are at right now in society. We're because of Christianity, we're understanding the roots of hierarchy and collective violence, and we're trying to work out what this means ethically, and it's creating a lot of topsy-turvy stuff because, when you unleash that passion and envy, like the underclass and these people in that movie and Joker show, everything throws up. Everything must go. Things are up in the air, and it can really spin off into chaos. But if we practice the imitation of Jesus, like what he does with the demoniac, is we heal the relationship with the Joker, the demoniac. We heal the person with psychological problems. We restore their relationship with love and forgiveness of whatever's hurt them, and we bring them into right relationship back into the community. That's missing in the story of Joker. And that's what's missing in a lot of our storytelling and newsmaking today. That's what's missing in our politics. It's revenge of the scapegoat, right? So the old order was, no, the winners will scapegoat the losers. And now we're dealing with a story where the losers get to get revenge on the winners. But no one wins in that scenario because we're all a lot more closer to the same, than we'd like to think. So that's the Joker. That's my analysis of the Joker. I'm David Gornoski. You can email me, david@neighborschoice.com.